mean, I'm open to anything. Oh, wow. Oh, you have to hold it in your left hand. I'm good with technology. So I don't know who came up with this idea of PorcFest, but I'm stunned and startled and moved by the whole thing because, well, for so many years I thought that the answer to our problems was somehow related to politics, and by which I mean I thought that we might have a system in place that would adapt itself to the will of the people through the conventional mechanisms of voting and God knows what. I don't know. I think I was 7 when I thought that. And but now, so now I'm realizing, and it's really a great moment in life when you suddenly realize this. Freedom isn't something that is given to you as a gift. It's something that you build for yourself. It's something that you make on your own. It's something you construct out of your own life in association with others. And if you sit around waiting your whole life for freedom, you'll never get it, and nobody will ever get it. But if you change your outlook and realize this thing we call the state, this despotic oppressive agency, is actually in many ways just a highly bureaucratized and it's mostly shabby piece of junk, the parasitical anachronism that's sort of dragging us back. Then you realize it's your own responsibility to build your own freedom for yourself, and that's a big change. And that overcame me really only when I first came to the Liberty Forum, when I saw what was going on in this movement in this state. When I was so inspired to see people taking responsibility for freedom for themselves. And now that I've come to PorcFest, I see just how much it's grown, and it's glorious. I mean, I'm here and I feel like I'm seeing the future in so many ways. I was just at the LP and gave a big talk about all the ways the state has failed in our time. I mean, I know you know all this stuff. But if you read the writings of a century ago of people who imagined a world that would be better, more beautiful, more prosperous, healthier, if the state were in charge of everything, took possession of all the command posts of society, everything from communication to security to cradle to grave, income support, everything. That was the view 100 years ago, 100 years ago. It didn't really exist before then, really. The whole modern Leviathan was created in like 1913 or whatever. If you compare what they believed would happen with what's actually happened, it is astonishing. I mean, we're right now living in the midst of an epic meltdown of a very, very evil worldview. And it's being swept aside, just systematically, day by day. And it's a beautiful time to be alive for that reason. The theory of Leviathan is so complete. There's a huge chasm that separates the theory of the state from the reality of life today, like in every area. And it's become like enormously delightfully fun. Like every day you wake up and you see more evidence of this. And if you look at this world this way, you could be enormously happy about the prospects for liberty. So maybe I'll just mention a few examples of what I mean. So you can watch this on YouTube if you want. Richard Nixon, like 40 or so years ago, declared a war on pot. I mean, can you imagine? He was going to use all the intelligence, power, and resources of the state to get rid of this stuff and like vanquish it from the planet, And nowadays, I mean, it startles me, but it's easier to get marijuana in high schools than cigarettes or alcohol. Actually, it's an incredible thing. I mean, you talk about an epic failure of government. Nothing compares to this. I was reflecting the other day when I was in like 4th or 5th grade. The cops came by my classroom to give an advertisement for marijuana. But that's not what they were intending to do, actually. So this big mean man got in front of us and he said, "Okay, kids, I've got some very bad news for you. There's some very bad actors out there, and they're distributing terrible things, and they might come to you and ask you to smoke things like this." And he pulled out this big like sheet, like a display that had, like various cigarette-looking things on it. He said, "Just so you know what these look like, this one's red, this one's pink, this one's orange, this one's blue." And they variously go by names like reefer, joint, whatever. And he's going through this list. He says that, whatever you do, if somebody comes up to you, don't talk to him. Come and report him to me immediately, because then it'll be, just be fried. And we were all just like desperate to know more about this amazing substance we're not supposed to have. I remember in the back of the classroom that day, again, this is like 4th or 5th grade in public school. In the back of the classroom, there was a guy who was always sort of vaguely unpopular. It was known back in the day as a pothead. He might have been a fake one, but at least he pretended to be one. And nobody really liked him. They avoided him. So when the policemen started talking about all the drugs that they had, we all looked back at him, and he had this knowing look like. And he just suddenly had massive status in our eyes. We're like, "Oh, well, that is a really cool guy after all." And then the policeman went on, talked about other drugs. Well, this is, I don't know what the popular drugs were at the time. I'll get the name wrong anyway. But, narcotics of various sorts. And we look back at him and he'd go. And suddenly we were in awe of this amazing man, And after the class ended, we all surrounded him. "Can you tell us what it's like? Where can we get that stuff?" It was like an advertisement, This is what the state ends up doing, Everything it opposes, it ends up advertising. Like when we just heard from wonderful Lynn Ross, Albright. Ulbricht, sorry, yeah. But she's talking about her son who's in jail right now. But it was a very interesting thing when they took down the Silk Road. So the FBI is up there, and they're saying a very bad man, over the course of 3 or 4 years, managed to run a global online drug marketplace, and he made, hundreds of millions of dollars. And we only caught him because he put his email address on a public forum. But thank God he did, because now we've nailed him and stopped this vicious, wicked thing called the Silk Road. Well, you can imagine how many listeners were hearing this. They're like, hundreds of millions of dollars, huh? And he just made one little slight mistake, So sure enough, within a few days, there's many friends of mine had money in escrow in Silk Road at the time. But within about 30 days, there was Silk Road 2, popped up. And now it's thriving all over the place. How many of you have been to Silk Road 2? Have you been there? Yeah, you have to get this sort of the darknet thing or whatever. But the volume is apparently 4, 5, 6 times as large as Silk Road 1. It's like just going as never before. And the new administrator has thought through how to avoid all the mistakes that were made the first time around. And many developers are now putting together open source models. Hi, Lynn. Hi. Open source models of the same software, so that it can never go down. And it's a beautiful thing to see. Yeah, it's beautiful. I was on there and I was amazed at just the sheer traffic. That's because I was looking at some product. I can't remember what it was for. Something I didn't really understand, really. But I was looking at the user ratings, and the top 5 user ratings for this, I think it was actually methamphetamine, was the top 5 user ratings had been submitted that day. So this is busier than Amazon, Isn't it amazing? Is there anything more joyful in this life than watching the powerful fall from their towers? To see the mighty brought to their knees, to see their arrogance reduced like this through the collective actions of humanity. It's a beautiful thing. It's lovely. Because through the market economy, we're seeing producers and consumers cooperate together despite every attempt by the most powerful people with all their wisdom and intelligence and moral apparatus and tools. They can't do it. They are not as powerful as the collective mind of the rest of humanity that just longs to be free. It's not very complicated. We just want to do what we want to do, and we want to do it peacefully. And we will not be held back by these bastards. It will not happen. So 40 years after Richard Nixon declared his war on drugs, the whole thing lies in tatters, and it's absolutely thrilling. It's absolutely thrilling. But it's just the beginning. Almost every institution that the state constructed over the 20th century, the century of the great error of Leviathan and despotism and control, is collapsing before our eyes every single day. It's amazing. I've lived through, for example, the enormous calamity of the Iraq War. I remember the very first invasion in which we bombed the hell out of everybody. This was 25 years ago. You know what the theory was? The theory was, oh, there's a despot in charge of this country, and we can improve it, actually. We know exactly how to do it. All we need is a lot of bombs, and then we'll send in our glorious advisors. They will make the place just like the United States. And next thing you know, Iraqis will be holding backyard barbecues and loving baseball, and we'll make them just like us. And George Bush, after a few days, rode back on a boat. Do you remember this? Rode up to the harbor with a big sign that said, "Mission accomplished." Okay, that was 24 years ago. Unbelievable. And then followed 10 years of sanctions because that first war didn't work. And then there had to be another war because the sanctions didn't work. And then there had to be, I don't know, just unrelenting killing and drones and bombs and death. And now we look at a country that's just, what, in a 4, 5, 6-way civil war? And Obama's like, oh my God, we have to do something about this. Let's bomb. Well, who should we bomb? Well, we're not entirely sure, actually. Just somebody, Because, a show of force will cause all Iraqis just to go, oh my God, we forgot for a second that the US is in charge of the world, and we'll comply from now on. Look, their struggle is our struggle. All people oppressed by the state are part of our struggle. We're all engaged in the same battle. It's a battle of the individual choice, individual agency, the aspirations of the human person, all 7 billion of them, against the despots all over the world who want to rule us. They will not win the struggle. The individual mind, crowdsourced, working through markets, working through human associations like PorcFest, are massively more powerful than all the states in the world combined, throughout all time and all history. It's a beautiful thing to see. So we should take some solace, some pride in what's happening. I mean, we can look back and say this was terrible. We see the carnage, we see the death, we see the blood, we see the massive loss of human energy, and it's ghastly. That's the cup half empty, but the cup half full is that we're winning the struggle. And the state is running out of options. Not just in the drug war, not just in the military empire, but in every aspect of its functioning. From Social Security. Do you remember there was a time, like 70 years ago, 80 years ago, when the government imagined it was going to provide for all of our retirement? Haha. Right? I mean, who in this room even believes this? This is just sheer nonsense. We all understand now we're just being fleeced. Or how about the post office? That's a hilarious one. You know when Vladimir Lenin after a long life of living the revolution, finally got control of the government in Russia. It's the worst thing that can ever happen to a revolutionary, actually, is to suddenly have to be responsible for doing something, after the old system is gone. So Lenin was challenged, like, what are we going to do now that the communists are in charge? And Lenin said, well, we're going to bring electricity to all the Russian people. That's what communism is. He said, if you want to sum up communism in 2 phrases, it's dictatorship of the proletariat, which meant dictatorship by him, and the electrification of Russia. That was his first job. And after 5 years, lots of new people had electricity, but it was really a regrettable situation that none of them had food. So, let them eat light bulbs. I ended up being this slogan of the early Russians. But he was asked, how can socialism work, really? He said, well, it's not really complicated. All we have to do is repeat exactly what goes on in the US with regard to the post office. We'll just turn the whole economy into one big post office, and then everything will be wonderful. That's what he said. I mean, that was a century ago. If he said that today, there would be like eggs from the audience, like pelting this guy. It's a disaster. The post office is one of the most hilarious and ridiculous anachronisms that exist in the US today. Friends of mine in China maybe don't know this. Did you know that they have their own state mail system in China? But nobody uses it. I mean, like, their trucks roll around. They build their little outposts in their departments and things like this. But nobody actually uses this unless you absolutely have to. It's something like an international trader. The whole thing is collapsing, and it's a national joke. And there are thousands and thousands of private services that are displacing them. And that same thing is happening in the US. And it's not anything that the government wanted. I don't know if you know this, but back in the early 2000s, did you know that that the government tried to invent its own email system? It did. Yeah, the post office tried to come up with an email system of its own. And the Postmaster General gave a big speech. He said, a lot of people are using this thing called email, and it's all being provided by these weird little private enterprise people. But it's no good. We can actually do a much better job. And he was asked the question, well, why would anybody want to use the government email system as versus a private email system? And the answer came very quick and was very obvious to him. Because people trust the government. I mean, apparently he actually believed this, It's amazing to think this. This is what they always believe, that they're more trustworthy than private enterprise. It's radically wrong. I remember looking at a post office one time. They had a postal buddy in the office, and it was this scary-looking machine. It looked like it was going to devour your life if you even touched it. And I guess maybe over the course of 18 months, they got 3 people signed up for the service or something, and then they eventually cut it out. They stopped fiddling with it. It was ridiculous. So I mean, the lesson here is the government can try to control. They can try to run the world. They can use their stupid theory of despotism and Leviathan and compliance to try to manage the world. But in the end, it's disobedience, it's non-compliance that rules the day. And that's the story of the last 20 years, a story of a massive collapse of a huge Leviathan state. It's unsustainable in every aspect of life. Another area that really excites me when I think about it is the Federal Reserve. This is the mighty institution that gained power over our money and credit 1 century ago. Again, it seems like everything evil happened in 1913, 1914, or something like that. Money was socialized, nationalized, taken over by the state. They said, we'll make it, we'll manage it, we'll make the world beautiful and prosperous, and eliminate inflation, and eliminate business cycles. We'll do all these magical things through our scientific management techniques. And, a century of massive inflation, economic upheaval, calamity all over the world thanks to the Federal Reserve. We should have known, right? From the very first, what was the very first thing the Federal Reserve did once it got in control? It funded a world war. That was it. Mass killing machine. Forget making the world prosperous. making the world a killing field was the very first thing that happened. Is that right, today? Yeah, wow. There would have been no World War I without the Fed. You know, historians think they're doing history, and they don't study the money issue. They're completely wrong, actually. I mean, money is the thing that wrote the history. Bad money is the thing that wrote the history of the 20th century. But something happened in January of 2009 that I never would have imagined in my whole life. And I'm a student of monetary history. I've been studying it since I was a junior in college. Something extraordinary happened. The very first Genesis block came out carrying Bitcoin on this beautiful ledger in the sky. A brilliant, brilliant system using cryptography, open source software development, a distributed network, all of these tools combined together to make this beautiful alternative and replacement for the Federal Reserve and all central banks around the world. And 10 months went by, in which time this currency had no value at all. But people, geeks and nerds all around the world, were hammering on the system to make sure it worked, to make sure the ledger was actually solid and sound, that you could actually transfer property from on a geographically non-contiguous basis, peer-to-peer, anywhere in the world, and it did work. And October 5th, 2009, we saw this amazing thing happen. Bitcoin obtained its first market price. It was something like a 1/12 of a penny, but it was a foreshadowing of a beautiful future. And here we are only 5 years later, and we've seen the construction of the basis of a new global monetary system, completely outside of the state. It's an important parable for us, because if you look at the way Satoshi approached his task, when he came up with this monetary system, he didn't drop an email to the Federal Reserve and propose it. He didn't go to the Senate Banking Committee and say, I have a better idea. You know, he didn't publish his results in the American Economic Review. He didn't do any of those things. What he did is he released his new protocol out on a free internet forum and said, if you like my money, use it. And that was it. And nobody even knows who this guy is. That's revolutionary. That's the techniques that are going to make for a new kind of freedom in our age. A bottom-up revolution through technological innovation and radical entrepreneurship. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And it's so wonderful, isn't it, when the market outsmarts the intellectuals? You know, isn't it just so glorious? Doesn't it give you just like lift up your heart when you see every smart person in the world completely amazed and dumbfounded by market developments? I mean, it gives you hope for humanity. I mean, I myself, when I first heard about Bitcoin, I thought, that's the last thing I need, you know, is another file type, another goofy technology. I don't need to know anything about this, you know, spare me, please. And it took me 2 years to fully understand what was going on. And it was actually at the Liberty Forum in New Hampshire where I was surrounded, and they gave me Bitcoin for the very first time, and I felt it like arrive on my cell phone. And I opened my mind, and I began to adjust my theory of life. And I took my Bitcoin, I sold a number of bow ties, actually, immediately on the spot. I was selling them for 3 Bitcoins a piece, can you imagine? Those are some expensive bow ties. I actually have one, if anybody wants to buy it, 3 Bitcoins. Yeah. And then I went home and I decided to do some shopping, and because I wanted to see if it really worked. And so I went to a place called the Bitcoin Store, and they had, I just wanted to buy something, anything. So I bought the very first thing I saw, which was a pair of crimping pliers up in the far left-hand corner of the screen. I thought, well, I could use those. I didn't have anything to crimp, but you know, I just wanted to buy something. And I held up my QR code, and I saw my property transfer like immediately, peer-to-peer, without ever putting in any information about myself other than my delivery address. And you know, I didn't have to cough up the whole of my life or risk credit card fraud or anything else. And just I saw this, it was, God, what a moment that was. There's like a flash of light, boom, and it was gone. And I sat down my phone on the table. I was at my dining room table, and I got up, I pushed the chair back, and just danced around the table for about 10 minutes because I had seen the future. Do you understand what that meant? I mean, it's like to see the light, to see hope, it changes the whole way you think about the world. It makes you realize something extremely important. They can have all the power, all the resources, all the control, all the official institutions, own the media, have their badges and their honors and their degrees and everything else. But none of it matters in the face of human ingenuity from the ground up. This is the source of the real power of civilization itself. It doesn't come from the top down. We built civilization through anarchy, through the sheer chaos of human interaction, one person at a time. And that's the way we're going to rebuild the future. Not through some sort of top-down plan, but through a system that's very much like PorcFest, right? You just establish a template, give us an infrastructure, turn us loose, and then amazing and wonderful things will happen. And that's what's happening all over the world, in every area of life. How many of you have read Thomas Kuhn's book, Structure of Scientific Revolutions? It's a really, it's a brilliant book. And it talks about a very interesting phenomenon in history. What happens to science is that science coalesces around a single theory of life. And this theory sustains itself so long as everybody believes it, and people are willing to go along with it. And then anomalies begin to appear. Strange events start happening that fall outside of the theory. And it begins to kind of become uncomfortable. And then there's more anomalies that begin to appear. And over time, the consensus begins to break down. And people begin to see this is no longer working. And then the theory ends up collapsing. And we enter into what he calls a pre-paradigmatic stage, where no one knows what the hell is going on, right? Until somebody else comes up with a new theory that seems to explain the anomalies. The anomalies are the thing that cry out for explanation. And then a new theory develops, and science progresses. As I read Kuhn's treatment of this, I realized, oh my God, this is exactly the way political orders and societies proceed also. We coalesce around a theory. There's too many anomalies that are breaking the theory down. We discard the theory. We enter into a pre-paradigmatic stage until a new theory emerges that explains the anomalies, first of all. And I realized that this is actually the way we can understand our times. What was the theory of the 20th century? The theory of the 20th century is that powerful people with lots of resources and lots of intelligence can run life better than you and I can. That was the idea. But in our times, we are surrounded by anomalies everywhere. Nothing they constructed works anymore. Not their social security systems, not their monetary systems, not their fiscal systems, their military empires and mails and communication systems, their ministry of information. We laugh at it, it's a joke. Everything they do has become absurd, preposterous, unworkable, and not servicing of humanity. And the anomalies have accumulated to the point that the theory itself has broken down. And my friends, I mean, I hope you understand how fortunate you are to be alive in these times. Because we see in our times the development of technological tools that we, meaning the people of the world, have never had access to before. Never. Open source software development, unbelievable. Crowdsourcing, the improvement of software all over the world. And most importantly, the distributed network. The distributed network. You know what that is, right? We need to learn about this stuff. A distributed network is something that can be replicated trillions of times, but still remain exactly the same as it always has been, and live at any computer node anywhere in the world. All right? This is the distributed network. What it means is that all of the states in the world can conspire together to try to crush it, and they can succeed billions of times. They can kill every node owner they want. So long as one node exists, it can be re-replicated within seconds, another billion or trillions of times. This is the way a distributed network works, right? All of human history, however long you want to consider that to be, let's just say 250,000 years or so, we've longed for a system like this. Something that was obviously more powerful than all of the thugs in the world, no matter how many badges and official honors and legal privileges they have. We longed for one tool, one thing that was more powerful. We've never really had it. In the past, private enterprise made guns, then government got guns. Private enterprise made streets, then this government took over streets. Private enterprise made education, then the government took over education. We invented science, the government took over science. Well, this time, we've invented the distributed network. There's nothing the government can do about it. Nothing is ours. What? We're working on that. Yeah. We've got P2P systems of ISPs developing now all around us, and it's very beautiful. Made safe, right? You know about that, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, some people worry that our ISPs are government cartels, basically. And if the NSA wants to take down the internet or, snoop or whatever they can. And it's a flaw of the way the digital age works right now. But, every flaw cries out for a solution. So there are many people working today on crowdsourcing internet power too, so that we can be liberated from our ISPs. We've already got ways to be liberated from a domain registration through ICON, actually, through Namecoin is the name of the service. So there are many things happening. Well, in other words, see, the thing is that we're in a process right now of dismantling Leviathan, one step at a time. And for the first time in history, we actually have the tools to make this a reality. And there are several aspects to this reality that I would just want to draw your attention to. One is that it's eliminating third parties. We, as humanity, we aspire to communicate with each other peer-to-peer. We don't like third parties, whether it's credit card agencies, banks, or governments. Because all these third parties exclude people. I mean, look at the world financial system today. It's excluding basically half of humanity from it. This wicked cartel, it put up a wall between those who are banked and those who are unbanked, those who have credit cards and those who do not. Bitcoin doesn't care anything about this stuff. It's a peer-to-peer system that's capable of liberating the whole of humanity to participate in the great project of billions of civilization through the division of labor. And if you have a cell phone and have access to the internet, then you have access to Bitcoin. So it collapses third parties like that. It's going to, over the next 10 years, we will see this happen. As cryptocurrency makes ever more progress, we're going to see progressive liberation of humanity from this despotic nationalized money regime. Another thing that's amazing about the distributed network and the peer-to-peer systems we're developing today, they don't care anything at all about the nation state, about these arbitrary borders drawn on the map by politicians. It just doesn't matter. I mean, look at something like the app economy that's developed in our time. Nobody ever gave permission for the app economy to exist. Nobody. I mean, no act of Congress said, okay, there can be an app economy. And nobody ever said that. It just developed out of nowhere. And now it's a gigantic global sector where we have millions of apps we can download instantly. And when we download them, do we care if the developer is from Belarus or Beijing or Porto Alegre, Brazil, or Calgary, Canada? We don't care. I mean, nations don't matter to us as consumers in the digital age. It doesn't matter to us where people are from. The nation state is not the unit of control anymore in the new world of the digital age. And it's a very beautiful thing to see. Humanity coming together cooperatively rather than being organized by states. So we have the tools. We have we're in the midst of a time when a theory is obviously failed. That theory is statism. It's been a calamity. It's ever more obvious to everybody. We're in the last stages of statism. I'm more and more convinced of that. The next 10 years are going to be the most revolutionary times in the history of the world. Most of the elites are almost oblivious to it. Actually, they're terrified of it. You know John Kerry's statement the other day that the internet makes the world very difficult to rule, you know? Yeah. That's right. That's right. So here's the thing. If we're going to follow Thomas Kuhn and this whole paradigm and understand what's going on here, what is our job? We're entering into what he calls a pre-paradigmatic stage. An old theory of life is collapsing. It's no longer relevant. It no longer explains the world. It's no longer working. It's going away. We're entering into a time of kind of theoretical chaos where nobody knows what the hell is going on anymore. The people in this room, the people at this campground, the people as a part of this movement, this liberty-minded movement, do understand. So what is our job? Our job is to be the vanguard of building the new institutions for the future. There's two aspects to this, it seems to me. One is entrepreneurship. I've tried to do this in my own life by building really a very vigorous and wonderful and thrilling city in the clouds. It's called Liberty.me. I wanted it to be the most impressive communications tool ever in history. And I think up to now, I'm sure somebody's going to beat me in the future, but so far I think I've got it. It's through entrepreneurship, I think, and institution building is one way. There's a second thing, and that second thing is education. We have to help our friends and our fellows to understand the failure of the state, and to understand the new path of human liberty going forward. As we approach this job, I think it's extremely important that we not have, that we approach our task with a broadness of mind, you know? I mean, I adore libertarians, convinced, dedicated libertarians, but those are not the only people I hang out with, right? I mean, I hang out with people who are leftists, who are rightists, you know, and everything in between, and people who don't care about anything at all. We need to be ready to approach anybody with the great message of human liberty. I really believe that the message that we carry with us is completely nonpartisan. It doesn't discriminate between demographic groups. We're not tied down to the wicked ways in which the state has tried to divide us by race, divide us by religion, by sex. No more. It's all over. Everybody is a potential convert to the great cause. What is that great cause? Among friends, I will say the word, anarchy. That's the word. Among friends, I will say this. Actually, I'll say that among people who are not friends. I always like to call myself an anarchist. That's my preferred term for myself because it puts people at ease in some way. You know, it's like at least you're not a Democrat or a Republican. There's some weird threatening thing like that, you know. So I like to call my anarchists, and they say, "What does that mean?" I said, "Well, I just have this weird sense that actually people can more or less get along and solve their own problems, and that's pretty much it. It's not really complicated." You know? That's my whole theory of anarchism. And they say, "Well, but," and it's like, you know, then I'll start talking, but you know, but yeah, and that's really all it comes down to. I mean, we have confidence in each other and in ourselves, and our problem-making ability, solving abilities. We see problems, we solve them. Outsourcing our intelligence to an agency called the state is the stupidest, most wicked choice ever made in human history. Never forget something very important about the state. I mean, lots of us are scared of it, and rightly so. It's doing wicked things. Good friends of mine, great heroes, are right now in jail thanks to the state and its wicked powers. But sometimes we can exaggerate its omnipotence over our lives. What is the state? Is it the politicians? No. They're clowns. They're actors. They get elected. They're the veneer on top of a system. They get elected, and what is the very first thing they do? They try to get reelected. That's pretty much it. That's the whole of their job. Is it the bureaucrats? In many ways, they are the sort of the machinery of the state that operates in real life. And yet, I think we can go too far in blaming any single public servant individually for the problems that exist. What are they doing? They're showing up to work as late as possible, leaving as early as possible, extracting every bit of vacation time they possibly can, and enjoying their economic security. Many of them have no choices but to be where they are today. And most of them would be glad to leave for some other job, actually, that paid more and gave them more dignity. All the polls show that public servants are the least happy people on the planet, actually, and I can totally understand why. I remember sitting outside the IRS building one day. There's a park right outside of the IRS building where all the employees go to eat their lunch. And if you just sit down next to one of them and say, how do you like their job? They're like, you don't want to know. I hate my job. What do you think about this agency? I think this agency is disgusting. What do you think about your boss? He's an asshole, actually. Yeah, but the way they talk, you realize they loathe their jobs. So I don't think that the public servants themselves can be considered the state. What is the state then? The state is the code book. It's the rules and the laws. It's the 100,000 volumes or whatever it's up to now. They don't even print it anymore because it's too big. That is ruling us. That's the sort of template by which the state operates. And this code book, this rule book, has been accumulated over like 100 years of bad legislation, of error and mistake. So many of the laws that are ruling us today were passed by people who are long dead. And we're being ruled by a bunch of dead people, basically. This is the essence of what the state is. And it's a wicked and horrible system. It's not democracy, This is ruled by an entrenched system. I don't know how many of you are coders in this room or have written computer code, but yeah, you know this term named cruft? Yeah. Cruft is bad code. That's causing the system not to work anymore. It's just clogging things up. That's what our laws are, and that's what the state is. The state is the cruft of civilization, essentially. Bad code that's outmoded and making the system of society work less and less well. What's our job, ultimately? I have a vision of a gigantic bonfire. And we're all crowded around it, like that one last night that I hung out at until 3 a.m. last night. And each of us has a book, and one of them is a regulatory book. Each one of them is a book of laws, and we hurl it into the fire and watch it burn. That's what I would like to see. That's what I would like to see happen to the state. No blood, no death, no violence, just a gigantic burning of cruft. That's what I want to see in the future. But we do that every time we innovate, every time we use the tools like Bitcoin, like homeschooling, anything that causes our lives to be freer. We make a contribution to the dismantling of the system of despotism and Leviathan that's oppressing humanity. So what can we do as individuals? Well, you can vote if you want. That could help, I suppose. It's not my thing, but it might be your thing. We can become politically active and pass out flyers, and that's fine. I think the single most important step we can make is to examine our own lives and figure out how we, as individuals, can become freer. That is the powerful thing. We have to find the flaw, and every system has a flaw. Find it, exploit it, make our own lives freer, live freer in our own lives, and then find friends, and then develop associations, then develop institutions, make them bigger and more robust. Then they become mighty. And then we crowdsource our information, and the system gets larger and larger and larger, and eventually we're larger, more powerful, and more wonderful than any of the people who rule us. And then we can defeat them. Then the logic of history takes place, the trajectory begins to work, and an old system is replaced. by a new system. And you know what? This is not just happening in our times. This is the way revolution has always proceeded in history. We had 200 years of colonial experience before we threw off the British rule. Over the course of 70 years of Soviet despotism, the Russian citizens got together, they invented underground presses, black markets, new forms of human associations, new systems of trust, peer-to-peer. And eventually they woke up one day and the state had no power to enforce its vision on the world. That's where we're headed today. I'm deeply, deeply inspired by what I've seen at PorcFest. I'm so excited to be with you today, not just because I have so many friends here and because it inspires me personally, but because I see in the associations between these beautiful human beings gathered on this campground a future of liberty, a future of institutions that are more powerful than any government in the world. The power of the individual mind, working with other individual minds, eventually all the guns in the world cannot stand up against that. It's the ideas that matter. It's the ideas that are immortal. It's the ideas that are malleable, that are truly eternal. Compared to that, guns, jails, all their systems of oppression are absolutely nothing. I thank you so much for listening to me today, and I look forward to taking any questions you might have. Thank you. I can't even begin to describe to you how happy I am to be here, because for years I've heard about the glories of PorcFest, and everybody said, look, this is your natural home. You know, it's just, look at you. You just belong here. I feel that way very much. I'm so excited to be here. And next year I'm going to come for more than just one day, right? Yeah. Oh, let's have some questions. Come on. Go. Do you camp? Do I camp? Well, I feel like I'm camping in a way because I'm staying in this little hotel room over here, which is sort of, in many ways, sort of camping. It's camping-ish in a way. Yeah. No, I'm a real survivalist, really. I've traveled 7 cities in 10 days. That's first world problems, right? So yeah. Anyone else? Yeah, go. Yeah. You know what I think the dramatic change is going to be in our time, and I can't wait for it, is the next monetary crisis. It's going to be worse than 2008. It's going to be grim, and all the fake essentially bankrupt institutions that have been inflated by the Federal Reserve, and all their balance sheets patched up with fake money creation are going to come tumbling down. So and it's going to be hysterical and wild, and they're going to keep trying to bail out the system. At that point, all I can say is hold on to your bitcoins, because it's going to be a wild ride. Yeah, it's going to be amazing, and that could happen anytime, really. It could be beginning now. We don't know. It might be 5 years from now. But what they did after 2008 is absolutely unsustainable. They keep trying to patch up the system. I mean, what are the tools that they have? Compliance, and print money. It doesn't work. This stuff is not going to fix up the world. It's absolutely unsustainable. So I expect a major monetary crisis will do it. It might begin in the U.S. It might begin in Latin America. It could begin in the Far East. We don't really know. But I expect there'll be some precipitating event like that. Yeah.
I have a fear that they could do something with electricity, knock out all the power stations, and how would we even get to communicate if we do rely too much on technology, either for a monetary or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, this is a concern about our electrical systems and the grid, right? I mean, the grid, which is nationalized by the state. Well, I'm not. It's very interesting. I'm ever more sympathetic to the survivalist sort of movement. I mean, it's not really my way, really, but I'm really glad there are people like that. It's just like I'm really glad that there are people walking around this campground with guns, but I'm not much of a gun owner myself, Yeah, yeah. So I look at people in the developing world without any electrical systems at all, and they all manage very, very well with generators and that sort of thing. So I think we can get by, and I really am glad for the preppers and stuff. I mean, people make fun of preppers. I mean, the preppers are probably smarter than all of us. Really, I'm not, as I say, I'm not a prepper, but when the time comes, I'm going to be looking for them. Like, can you help me, please? But yeah, look, the grid was a ghastly mistake. Again, all this stuff was constructed over the course of 100 years. We're going to have to dismantle everything that they tried to do, but we're in the course of doing that, and the preppers are helping, I would say. Yeah. Who else? Go ahead. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have tools now that we've never had before, right? And communication tools, we can talk to each other. One of the most amazing things that's happened. I love all these services. Like, I always use Uber wherever I can. When I'm in a city, I love to click my Uber app and congratulate the driver for being part of the great anarchist revolution. He's always a little bit startled to hear it, but. And Airbnb, which is hilarious, is shredding zoning laws all over the world. And 3D printing, my God. You know what 3D printing does? I mean, the state worked for 100 years to develop this massive apparatus of regulations and patents and controls, and it's all being dismantled with CAD files that are distributed on networks all over the world. And so that with 3D printing, none of their crappy systems, have any relevance whatsoever to the rest of the world. It's an amazing thing. This becomes extremely important for us. It doesn't matter if you're using bad shower heads or bad gas cans or any of the rest of the bad, nonsense products the state's given us. With CAD files and 3D printing, it just doesn't matter anymore. They can regulate, but it's just not going to matter. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. Right. So I think things are coming to an end today, but I'm going to be around, like all day and tomorrow. So I'm happy to socialize with you. I'd really like to get to know you. And thank you so much for listening to my talk today.